Imagine you're inside of a small submarine at a depth of 3,008 meters in the Atlantic Ocean, all to peek out of a porthole and see the most famous of all sunken ships, the Titanic. You enjoy a charming view of the seaweed-covered rusty banisters on the deck and the spooky dark passages leading to the halls where Britain's richest used to relax. They were as rich as you, since this tour cost a pretty penny. Suddenly, the light inside the submarine starts flickering in an unsettling way. In less than a second, the pressure around the submarine became so high that the vessel got compressed and crushed like an aluminum can. Everything happened so fast that you didn't even have the time to feel any pain before dying. Submarines are usually used for serious military missions. It was very dangerous during World War II, although serving on one of them was a great honor. Of all people, Jesse Da Silva, a military man who served on a famous American submarine named USS Tang, knew this very well. The submarine was first launched in 1943, and in her 14 months of service, she sunk 33 ships. The military team aboard the submarine saved the lives of 22 Navy pilots and received 2 Presidential Unit citations. Yet on October 24, 1944, the ship let her crew down. In the evening, the submarine was doing a routine patrol in the Taiwan Strait, following Japanese trade routes. Yet what USS Tang detected was not a trade boat, but a convoy of large enemy ships passing along the Chinese coast. Between Fuzhou and Amoy, Jesse and the rest of the team were delighted as they scored a bingo. Right away, Tang followed the enemy's convoy and started destroying it with torpedoes. The submarine sank 2 cargo ships and a tanker and damaged some vehicles. But when Tang fired the last torpedo, it suddenly broached and circled back on the boat. An explosion ensued. Jesse was standing near the galley when the missile struck Tang in the torpedo room. 3 rear compartments were instantly flooded, and all of the military who were there died on the spot. Yet 29 sailors, Jesse being one of them, managed to close the aft engine room, as well as the door between the forward machine room and the crew room. The sailors knew that very soon the pressure would cause the batteries, filled with toxic gaseous chlorine, to explode. The only way out of this trap was through the torpedo room with an escape trunk, from which they could exit the submarine and swim to the surface even if the boat had sunken. But to do this, they had to pass through a half-flooded radio room. The sailors broke the door, and the water came rushing into the room. It was still only up to their knees, yet the soldiers had to stay longer, risking their lives to burn the secret military documents in the room. Pushing through the smoke-filled passages, they finally joined a few more survivors who had been in the forward torpedo room at the moment of the torpedo strike. Some sailors wanted to flee as fast as possible, so they returned to the control room and tried to open a gun access hatch to get out through it instead of using the escape trunk. Yet when they broke through the door, clouds of smoke came billowing from the compartment. They shut the door immediately, but now it was even harder to breathe. Finally, Jesse and 3 other men reached the escape trunk. They filled it with water to level out the pressure and opened the outer hatch. For the first time, to breathe under the water, the sailors had to use the experimental Momsen lung. It's a kind of escape gear that processes the air that's breathed out, removing carbon dioxide. Jesse didn't know if it was going to work and whether he'd choke or not. Yet in the end, he and a few other men surfaced thanks to this contraption. By the way, this was the only time in history when people used this equipment. In the end, 13 people made it out of the submarine, but the Momsen lung didn't save everyone. Only 9 people reached the surface. When Jesse dived out of the water, he found 4 more sailors holding onto a buoy, and when he looked back, he saw the wrecks of the ships they'd struck from Tang. Suddenly, Jesse heard an explosion from under the water, and the waves around him started rocking the buoys. As it turned out, the whole time behind the torpedo room, pressure was rising in the submarine. The lining couldn't sustain the pressure, and the door got blown out. All of the sailors that hadn't made it outside yet died on the spot. In the aftermath of this tragedy, over 79 Tang crew members died. The 9 survivors were picked up by a Japanese frigate, after which Jesse, barely alive, was sent to a Japanese camp for prisoners of war, where he remained until the Allies' victory. But this story is close to being the only one in which at least someone managed to make it out of the submarine alive. But what exactly can cause a tragedy on an underwater boat. The most dangerous objects aboard military submarines are the weapons they're equipped with. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union spent staggering amounts of money on weapons designed to hunt down the U.S. aircraft carriers. They created nuclear-powered underwater boats, which NATO dubbed Oscar II. Each submarine carried 24 P-700 Granit rockets, which were the size of a small airplane, 10 meters long each. The missile could carry either an ordinary high-explosive warhead weighing 750 kilograms, which was enough to damage an aircraft carrier, or a 500-kiloton warhead, which according to its engineers could evaporate an aircraft carrier in one hit. On August 15th, the year 2000, one such nuclear-powered cruise missile submarine called K-141 Kursk was participating in military exercises in the Barents Sea. But at some moment, a real explosion roared from under the surface, and in just 2 minutes, there was another explosion, an even stronger one. There had been an unplanned blast of one of the ultra-heavy torpedoes, which made a hole in the ship's bow near the torpedo tube. The thing is, hydrogen oxide was used as fuel for the ammunition. Everyone knew very well that this chemical substance may be explosive, but it was cheaper this way. The second explosion was most likely caused by the detonation of the remaining torpedoes. Destabilized by the explosion, Kursk descended to a depth of 108 meters and started sinking. Meanwhile, Russia's president, Vladimir Putin, took 5 days to start the rescue operation and didn't want to accept the help offered by other countries. Because of this, all 118 crew members aboard the Kursk died. The most horrifying thing was that later, a note from one of the ship's officers, Captain Lieutenant Dmitry Kolesnikov, was found. It was written 2 hours after the second explosion. Apart from using the note to confess his love to his wife, Kolesnikov also wrote, "It seems we have no chance, about 10 to 20%. We hope at least someone will read this. Here are the lists of the compartment's personnel who are currently in the 9th and will be trying to get out. Hi to everyone, there's no need to despair." The note also read that at the time of the explosions, 23 people were still alive. As it turns out, for at least another 24 hours, they were in the ship's inner compartment, fighting for their lives before dying a horrible death, likely caused by carbon monoxide intoxication. As you can see, in time, all of the faults with the design and construction of a submarine are bound to show. This is also proven by another story that happened to a submarine called the Thresher. On April 9th, 1963, it was 354 kilometers to the east of the Cape Cod Peninsula, where just like Kursk, it was simply engaging in training. The Thresher was the first submarine using a new steel alloy named High 80, and the Navy wanted to determine to what depth the new submarine could descend safely. Yet at some point, while at a depth of 396 meters, the Thresher's radio man contacted the U.S. Navy's rescue underwater boat named Skylark, which was waiting on the surface, and informed the crew about some insignificant challenges. The radio operator also said they were trying to blow up the ballast tanks to go up to the surface, yet the Thresher never came back from that mission. Eventually, the Navy found it, but only as 6 pieces of wreckage at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. All 129 crew members died. There were many theories on how exactly the submarine sank. Some believe the catastrophe happened due to poorly welded seams that gave in to the pressure. Yet, to Captain Jim Bryant, retired submarine fleet officer, it all seemed suspicious. He believed the Navy was concealing something, so he took legal action, demanding that they publish a report on the Thresher's demise. The document had 1,700 pages and was classified. The Navy claimed this was necessary to protect the crews of the submarines that were still in service. All this even though the disaster happened during an ordinary training session. Furthermore, it's been over 50 years after the sinking, and the submarine's technology has become obsolete. Yet in the end, the Navy published only 19 pages. According to them, the most likely reason for the incident on the Thresher nuclear-powered submarine seemed to be the flooding of the engine room caused by ruptured pipes under the pressure of salt water. Yet both the analysis of the last messages sent out by the Thresher, as well as a later analysis of the acoustic recordings made by the sound surveillance system, which monitored the ocean floor, didn't confirm this claim. This is backed by the fact that if a large flooding had happened at the observed depth, it would have caused extreme noise levels, which would have hindered the radio operators' effective communication with Skylark. Still, such flooding could have been brought about by a fault in the diesel-electric engines, which caused the sailors to lose control of the submarine. The vessel couldn't regulate its depth and started sinking deeper and deeper until the high pressure destroyed it. That's why a lot of people blame the submarine designers for the sailors' deaths. After all, they overestimated what was possible for the scientific progress of the day, bit off more than they could chew, and abandoned the basics of engineering. That's why the Navy is still keeping the report out of the general public's access. Yet, this is far from being the most mysterious story of people dying on a submarine, which grew into a scandal on a global scale. For over 56 years, the incident with the Scorpion submarine has been shrouded in mystery and secrets. And there are reasons for this. This submarine is special. The Scorpion was a first-class military vessel designed to move at incredible speeds while remaining unnoticed by the enemy. The Scorpion was older than the Thresher and was among the first submarines to be powered by nuclear energy. The 76-meter-long Scorpion was equipped with a nuclear reactor, Westinghouse S5W, which produced 11,000 kilowatts of energy. This allowed the boat to move at a speed of around 61 kilometers per hour. Starting from 1968, the submarine was on an important mission in the Atlantic Ocean. It's unknown what exactly the mission involved, since all information connected with the Scorpion is considered top secret. Still, it most likely had to do with spying on and intercepting a Soviet maritime operation group located in the southwest of the Canary Islands, off the coast of Africa. The USSR was believed to have been engaged in its own spying, measuring the acoustic characteristics of the NATO ships in the region. That's why the soldiers aboard the Scorpion had until May 20th to, so to say, handle this problem and go back. So on that day, the families of the military members gathered in the port, eagerly waiting for their loved ones' arrival. Yet, they were late. Some people waited into the night, yet the sailors didn't return. On the following day, May 21st, the crew made contact via the radio and informed the radio operators, one of whom was Ken Larbes, that the mission was taking longer than planned, and the vessel was now 402 kilometers to the southwest from the Azores Islands, and that they'd return home from the mission on May 27th. This was the last message ever received from the boat, after which the Scorpion just disappeared. She was last located 644 kilometers southwest of the Azores. The radio operator, who had previously kept in touch with the submarine, was shocked when high-ranking captains and admirals visited his workplace in person. They kept whispering to each other and warned all their subordinates that the information about the Scorpion's disappearance must not be spread. It would have significantly compromised the U.S. Army's status and exposed its espionage mission. Of course, they didn't manage to keep it secret for long because the families of the soldiers demanded explanations. So, 5 days after the disappearance, the news came out that the Scorpion had vanished. Yet for some reason, the Navy provided no information whatsoever regarding what exactly had happened to the 99 crew members aboard. A month later, on the ocean floor, at a depth of 3 kilometers, a research ship named USNS Mizar found only some fragments of the Scorpion. But what had happened to her? Was it a crash? An attack? Could someone have made it to the surface and been rescued? Again, a lot of questions and not a single answer. Only in 2018, 50 years after the incident, radio operator Ken Larbes admitted having eavesdropped on the conversation of officers and captains when they were at his workplace on the day of the disappearance. He heard something about a confrontation with the Soviet military, as well as a sinking and an explosion, yet the US Navy has yet to issue an official statement. We can only guess the fate of the Scorpion crew based on the stories about the flooding of Tang, Kurske, and Thresher. Still, the reason why these stories were kept secret is clear. All these boats were military objects, and the risk of dying on one was undoubtedly high. Yet this doesn't mean you can't die in a submarine during an innocent adventure. On June 18, 2023, Hamish Harding and 4 other people got aboard a submersible called the Titan. Hamish was a die-hard adventurer and adored exciting and risky outings. He'd already submerged to the deepest point of the Mariana Trench, and had been to space as part of a suborbital mission named Blue Origin NS-21, after which he spoke out in favor of space tourists, also being called astronauts. And now, Hamish paid £20 million to dive in a submersible to see the sunken Titanic remains. For this, the vessel had to reach a record depth of 3,810 meters. In contrast, large nuclear-powered boats submerged to a depth of 300 meters. That was 13 times smaller. Yet this submersible was nothing like them. Compared to the military submarines, the Titan looks a bit like a kid's toy, at least because it's operated via a modified video game controller. Apart from that, it's very small and won't accommodate over 5 people. It doesn't even have seats, so the passengers have to sit on the floor. Yet it's impossible to ban people from submerging in such a dubious machine, as the Titan is located in international waters and isn't bound by any safety regulations. It's not even certified as seaworthy by any regulatory organ. Still, this didn't scare Hamish, who wanted to try this rather odd kind of tourism. All the more so given the fact that, before that day, the Titan had visited the Titanic wreckage over 37 times, and everything went to plan. At 9:30 a.m. on June 18th, the passengers entered the submersible, and its hatch was closed from the outside with 17 bolts. The submersion started. The Titan's system of surfacing and submerging was also simplified. Large military submarines can enter the sea and return to the surface on their own. However, to lower the submersible into the water and get it back later, a specially designated support ship was needed. That's why it's more correct to call the submersible an underwater vehicle instead of a boat. For safety, the Titan made contact with the support ship every 15 minutes. Yet after 11:15 a.m., the Titan stopped responding for some reason. Despite this, the submersible was expected to surface at 4:30 p.m., according to the plan. But it didn't show up at the designated time. Only at 7:10 p.m., when the support workers realized the submersible was having trouble surfacing, they informed the U.S. Coast Guard about the incident. Then, the race with time began, since the rescuers only had 96 hours to reach the submarine and free the people stuck inside it, as the vehicle only had enough oxygen for 4 days. Furthermore, even if the Titan had reached the surface, the passengers had not a single chance of helping themselves out, as the submersible hatch could only be opened from the outside. The rescue team would have greatly benefited in their search if the underwater vehicle had been equipped with an emergency locator beacon called the Emergency Position Indication Radio Beacon. It helps determine the whereabouts of ships. Yet, for some reason, it wasn't installed on the Titan. That's why the task of searching for the submersible turned out to be extremely difficult. Just imagine how difficult it is to find a bus-sized underwater vehicle on a territory of 25,000 kilometers. On the 3rd day of the search, a sonar of a Canadian airplane detected sounds coming from the depths, similar to a knock on the door. It ignited the hope that the people in the submersible were still alive and sending signals. And finally, on June 22nd, the Titan was found. But it was torn into pieces. It became clear that an implosion had happened on the submarine. Most likely, it was caused by the high pressure and defects in the vehicle's body. Typically, underwater boats are built from steel, titanium, or aluminum. Yet, as strange as it may sound, the Titan was made not of titanium, but of carbon fiber. It's an experimental material that had never been tested at such oceanic depths. The experts say the implosion destroyed the vehicle in mere milliseconds, which means that all 5 people who were aboard the submersible died on the spot. Sadly, the passengers of the Titan, just like the passengers of the Titanic, put their trust in promises from the ads. The price turned out to be too high. Look at this beauty though. Submarine tours are actually a pretty popular phenomenon at most sea and ocean resorts. They normally submerge to smaller depths than the Titan did. But are you going to inquire about the makeup of the alloy the vessel's made of, and whether the hatch opens before you board the submarine? I hope that after watching my video, you will. Write in the comments what dangerous underwater pastime activities you'd like to learn about in future videos. And subscribe to my channel to know what questions to ask the instructors before getting on a hot air balloon or making your first step on the Everest. Take good care of yourselves.